What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. This feels really good. I feel like I haven't done a video that included riding in a really long time. I don't know why that is. Just like the ideas that I've had for videos and whatnot have just been something else, or revealing the Softail build to you guys, stuff like that. So it does feel good to be back on a bike. In general, honestly, now that I think about it, I don't know when I rode. So I rode the Softail that I'm building over to my buddy's house, which is only 15 minutes, not even, from the dealership. And we immediately started taking stuff off to send to powder coat. And now it's stuck in limbo till I get stuff back from powder coater, etc. But that's besides the point. This video is not about the Softail Standard. This video is about the bike that I'm riding right now, which I'm sure by the title of the video you have gathered is not a Harley Davidson. This is my buddy Daniel's Yamaha Bolt. So this bike has been in the background of a couple of the videos. We haven't really talked about it or, really shown it much. And it's also been in the background of a few of my photos that are on Instagram. And that's exactly why I wanted to show this bike on the channel, because a lot of the people that follow me on Instagram thought this was a Dyna. I've gotten comments on the Instagram where people are like, oh, I like that dude's Dyna. And these are people that know bikes fairly well. Now, granted, here, I'll throw one of the pictures up just so you can kind of get a perspective shot of where they're coming from or how they came to that conclusion. I thought it would be fun to get this bike out and ride it and see how it compares to any of the Harley models. Now, being this is around 800 so cc's, this is actually in line with the Sportster, and that's where it should fall in line pricing wise. It doesn't, but not at the Yamaha Bolt's fault. That is Harley Davidson's fault, actually. So this bike you can buy brand new for right around $8 grand. I'll throw the actual price on the screen just so I get all my facts straight. But like I said, it's in line with the Sportster family, and it kind of comes set up like a Sportster. So here's what the Yamaha Bolt looks like completely stock, and I will do a walk around of this bike just so you guys can see how it's set up. I really like the setup. So Daniel has done a good bit of modifications to this, but he hasn't spent a whole lot of money, and that's kind of been his thing, is there's really no point in investing a ton of money. So do the things he needs to do. He set it up for 2-up riding for him and his chick. He put bars on it so it's more comfortable, put some pegs. It's actually running Harley Davidson shocks on the rear that somebody gave him. So I mean, realistically, he doesn't have a ton of money in this bike after the purchase cost. Now, what am I getting at with all this? Well, to be pretty frank, if it were me and it were my money and I had $8 grand to spend on a bike, I would probably buy this Yamaha Bolt before I bought a new Sportster. Now, I'm sure that comes off as pretty controversial, seeing how I have a good relationship with my Harley dealership. I have a relationship with Harley Davidson corporate. But that's kind of what I feel like has grown this channel, is my honesty and transparency. And I genuinely just feel like this is the better deal. Especially when you look at, say, like the new Nightster at $975. I rode that bike. I love that bike. I love the ride modes. There's a lot of things I love about it. If you watch that review video, you'll know the two things I don't. If you didn't watch them, that was the amount of plastic that was on that bike, especially for the $14,000 price tag, and the $14,000 price tag. So think about that. Think if you bought this bike for $8 grand. Yeah, it doesn't have some of the tech that little Nightster has in it. It's not going to be quite as fast, so we'll roll on the throttle real quick. This is not a slow bike by any means. Luckily, we have this nice Thresh and Supply bag covering the speedo, but let's just say you could break the speed limit if you wanted to do that. But back to the point. So 8 grand for this or 14 grand for the Nightster. Okay, let's get away from that 14 grand Nightster because I think we can all agree that thing is way overpriced. So let's take something a little closer. We'll say the 883 Iron, which has a kind of similar look, I guess, you know, close enough. But in my opinion, Harley has also really started to get nutty with the pricing of that thing. When I first got into Harley Davidson sales, I want to say, that was in 2015, I want to say the 883 Iron was maybe 8,900 bucks, somewhere right in there. I feel like it was just below 9 grand. And I'll say if I can find it online and fact check myself. But there has been very few changes since then. The only change that comes to mind are the adjustable rear shocks, which are a nice touch. But the 883 Iron's sitting right around $11,000 MSRP right now, when nothing has changed. I mean, I get inflation and all that good stuff, but dude, come on. 11 grand for an entry-level Harley Davidson is pricing people out of the market. So that 883 is designed to capture new riders, young riders, etc. Well, you're making it hard for them to be able to get on one of your bikes. So let's get this bike back to Daniel's house. I'll park it in his garage and I'll give you guys a quick walk around. I do encourage you to stick around for that part of the video because honestly, like, to the average person that's not a real big motorcycle enthusiast, this is a Harley. I mean, it's got a Vance and Hines pipe that doesn't quite sound like a Harley, but it's throaty and it sounds good. I'm a Harley guy, a Harley enthusiast, and I love this thing. The way this thing handles is great. It makes good power to be completely stock other than that pipe and that air cleaner. And again, it's about the money. You have to keep in mind how low the price tag is on this bike and what you could build the same exact setup for. It just makes more sense. So let's get this thing home. We'll do a walk around and I'll show you what all is going on with it. All right, so we're back at Daniel's. I'll give you guys a quick walk around of the bike so you can see what it looks like, and then we'll have him talk about what he's done to it and how little money he's put into it to make it look the way that it looks. Less than I thought even. So I kept mentioning this bike price based on like what you would go buy a new one for. He bought this bike used, so he has significantly less than that in it. All right, so this is my buddy Daniel. It's his bike. So I guess we'll start with the handlebars. Where are these bars from?
They're from Zombie Performance, or the 10-inch bars.
And do you remember how much they were?
I want to say somewhere around 300 bucks. They had to make them to order.
Yeah, so 300 bucks. Most people, I would say, could probably install their own bars as long as you're like somewhat mechanically inclined. Bars aren't too bad. On this bar though, did you have to extend the cables or no?
I didn't have to, but I did.
Yeah.
Like this one's stock, all I did was move it, of course. But these ones were getting pulled too far down, so it was actually causing the throttle to stick.
Oh yeah.
And I ordered them anyway because Motion Pro sells these cables for maybe 10 bucks a piece, so it was really cheap. Yeah,
so being that cheap, guys, just go ahead and extend them because like he said, you definitely don't want your throttle to stick, so I would encourage that. But I think the bars, I've already shown you guys the picture that I was referring to when I said, you know, most of my friends think it's a Harley when he rides with me. I think that kind of gives it that Dyna look from the front end, but also they're super comfortable. So I've ridden a lot of bikes, a lot of different handlebar setups. This felt perfect for me, and I mean, to me, they look cool with that raw finish. So it is running a Saddleman seat that he bought used from somebody. So that seat is, what is the retail price on that?
With the foam, because it has the gel foam all the way through it, I want to say it's like $450, $500. And I got it off Facebook Marketplace. I think I offered the kid $350 and he took it.
Yeah, so see, again, going back to like doing things on a budget, and that's kind of the point of this video again, is if you don't really have the budget for a Harley, it doesn't mean you can't ride or have a cool bike. So if that's the case, Facebook Marketplace or like the different like bike trader Instagram accounts really good outlet, really good resource to be able to build a bike. There's always takeoff parts available. As you can see, he's running the thrashing bags. A lot of Harley guys run these. These are probably what I'm gonna put on the Softail standard build, just because they're inexpensive. In my opinion, they kind of look the best out of what's available. I prefer hard bags, but I've yet to see a hard bag that you would put on a Softail or a bike like this that actually looks good. So I would probably run these as well. And then you probably noticed when I was riding, but just got the little thrashing handlebar bag on the front. So these are the shocks I was telling you guys about. If you're familiar with Harley, you'll recognize these. These are Harley shocks. Did these come off his Dyna?
Yeah, they did. So they'll fit on there. It's a 2-inch rise compared to the stock bolt shocks. And the eyelets are the same. I just had to move my bushings over.
Okay, so simple enough.
It was a really easy install. I just used a socket, punched them out, pressed them in.
Yeah, and you'll see how much it brought this bike up, which is very necessary because stock, this thing sits pretty low. Daniel's a pretty good rider, so even with these shocks, we're kind of getting into the meat of this bike. But if you're gonna be hitting curves or doing anything, or just like the better ride or better feel, again, that's another cheap option, is buy somebody's takeoff shocks. There's never a shortage of Harley takeoff parts. You see, these weren't hard to make work on the Bolt. So when I was riding this bike, I mentioned the performance, I mentioned the sound, and I forgot that he had done a tune, which, you know, whenever you change the exhaust and the air cleaner, you typically have to do a tuner. So it makes sense that he's done that. Daniel, do you want to tell him about the tune?
Yeah, so I did the Cobra tuner that does everything on its own. I forget how quickly it adjusts, but essentially I did the nicer one. They do the one that offers the different pods that you can adjust. This one does everything on its own. But that helped out a lot with the intake, and then of course having the slip-on on there. Yeah, so it's kind of like a self-adjusting tuner, guys. The more you ride, the more it kind of learns what it needs to do and does everything on its own, which again, money-saving thing. I mean, just to put a bike on a dyno these days is about 500 bucks or so, depending on where you go. So having a tuner that does everything on its own, and I mean, this thing ran great. It's not spitting, popping, doing anything like that. It makes good power for what it is. So I like that tuner. This Vance & Hines pipe sounded good. I don't know if you could hear it in the video that well, but sounds good, looks really good on this bike. It's got that upswept look, which also keeps it out of the way when you're leaning this thing over. And I've always been a fan of these very simple air cleaners, so I like the way that this one looks. So that's pretty much it. That's the Yamaha Bolt in a nutshell. After some good tasteful mods, some things that make this bike more enjoyable to ride, but also make it a little bit better looking. I give you guys one last walk around. I mean, even the wheels and brakes on this thing don't look bad. They performed great. He has changed the pegs. I mean, these are just simple little Amazon or, you know, Harley pegs that you can put on here. But overall, the Bolt, again, like I said, is probably gonna be my choice over any of the new Sportsters. Now, that's not to say you can't go buy a used Sportster and get a really good deal and do the same thing, but I doubt you're picking it up as cheap as you're picking up a Bolt. And that's how we'll end this video, guys. This bike is for sale. It is currently for sale. I'll throw Daniel's Instagram up on the screen right now. If you're interested in this thing, just slide in his DMs, let him know, and you guys can work out a deal.